God damn it. What the hell do you think you're doing? Filthy. Disgusting. That's something you don't touch. You serve it. You watch it. But you don't ever hold it. Jaden Johnson's voice cut like broken glass. He stormed into the room, yanked the baby girl from Sylvie Pratt's arms with a force that made her breath catch. No, please. She just fell asleep. She wouldn't stop crying. I don't care. He barked. You're the maid, not the mother, not anything. Ah. The baby screamed the moment she left Sylvie's chest. It was like something snapped. Her tiny hands clawed at the air, her sobs shrill and panicked. Shh. Ivy, shh. It's okay, sweetheart, I'm here, Jaden whispered. But the child only cried harder, writhing in his arms, red-faced and gasping. Why won't she stop? Sylvie stood frozen, heart pounding. I tried everything, she said quietly. She only sleeps if I hold her. That's all. He didn't answer, just stood there with his daughter crying louder by the second. Give her back to me, Sylvie said, voice low, firm. His jaw tightened. I said, give her back. She's scared. You're scaring her. Jaden looked down at the child, then at Sylvie. His eyes were ice, but underneath, something else. Confusion, hesitation, and then defeat. He handed Ivy back. The baby curled into Sylvie's chest instantly, like her body remembered safety. Just before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And make sure you're subscribed, BUP Storytelling, so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. Now, let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. The crying stopped in less than 30 seconds. Only a few hiccuping sobs remained as she drifted back into fragile sleep. Sylvie held her close, sitting back onto the rug, rocking gently, murmuring without thinking. I got you, little one. Jaden stood still, silent, watching. That night, no one spoke again, but the house felt colder. Sylvie laid Ivy down gently in her crib hours later. She didn't sleep at all. By morning, Mrs. Amanda found her sitting in the corner of the nursery, eyes wide, hands still trembling. She only sleeps with her, the older woman whispered under her breath, glancing toward the now peaceful baby. Jaden said nothing at breakfast. His tie was crooked, his coffee untouched. The second night, Sylvie tucked Ivy in and stepped away. The baby screamed. Mrs. Amanda rushed in. Jaden tried. Neither worked. Only when Sylvie returned, arms outstretched, whispering gently, did Ivy quiet. The third night, Jaden waited outside the nursery door. He didn't enter. He listened. No crying, only a quiet lullaby. Half hummed, he knocked. Sylvie, she opened the door. I need to speak with you. She stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. I owe you an apology, Jaden said. Silence. For what? Sylvie asked. Not soft, not angry, just steady. For how I spoke to you. For what I said. It was cruel and wrong. She nodded. Ivy knows what's real. She said she doesn't care about wealth or titles. She just needs warmth. I know. She won't sleep unless she feels safe. I know, he said again. And I don't think she's the only one. Jaden looked down. I'm sorry, Sylvie. A beat of silence. I'm not going to quit, she said. Not because of you, but because she needs me. I hope you stay, he said. For her, Sylvie repeated. But in her chest, something shook loose. Something she thought had been locked away for good. She didn't trust him, but Ivy did. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Sylvie Pratt moved through the house like a shadow. The dining room table gleamed, polished to perfection. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, but neither Jaden Johnson nor Mrs. Amanda said a word as Sylvie passed by with a folded blanket in her arms. Good morning, Sylvie said calmly, eyes forward. Mrs. Amanda nodded stiffly. Jaden looked up from his tablet, his jaw tight, but said nothing. It didn't matter. Sylvie wasn't expecting kindness. She wasn't here for it. She was here for the baby. Upstairs in the quiet nursery, Ivy was finally sleeping soundly, arms stretched above her head, a soft sigh in her chest. Sylvie sat beside the crib, not touching, just watching. Like always, like before, The events of the previous night still burned behind her eyes, but she kept her spine straight. That scene, his words, his tone, the way he tore the baby from her arms, those things weren't new to her. Maybe not in volume or sharpness, but in meaning. She'd been told her whole life she wasn't meant to hold, only to serve. But Ivy knew different. Ivy clung to her like she'd been waiting for Sylvie her whole life. Sylvie? It was Maren, peeking into the nursery. "Hey," Sylvie whispered. "She's asleep." Maren stepped in quietly. She sat on the edge of the chair next to Sylvie and whispered, "I heard what happened last night. I bet the whole house did. He's not used to people." Maren said, "But since Anthony, I'm not here for him." "I know," Maren said softly. "But you need to be careful. Men like Jaden, when they feel something, they push harder. They don't know how to ask. They just react." Sylvie's eyes stayed on Ivy. "She's the only one who didn't look at me like I was dirt." Maren touched her shoulder. "You're not dirt, honey. You're the only reason this house is holding together right now, even if he doesn't see it yet." If you felt touched by Sylvie's quiet strength, give this video a like and tell us where you're watching from. You might be surprised who else near you is watching too. Later that day, while folding towels in the laundry room, Sylvie heard Jaden's voice on the phone. "I told you I'm not interested in dinner meetings right now." "Aza, no, Christine. I don't care if she's in town. We're not getting back together." Another pause. Then, "Because I have a daughter who cries through the night unless a stranger holds her, and I can't even look that stranger in the eye because I've treated her like trash." Sylvie stood frozen behind the half-closed door. Jaden's voice dropped to a near whisper. "She's not just the help. I see that now, but I don't know how to fix what I said." The door creaked. Sylvie turned. He saw her. There was a beat of silence. Then he hung up the call without a word. "Eavesdropping?" he asked, voice stiff. "Laundry?" Sylvie replied evenly. He exhaled. "You weren't supposed to hear that. No one's ever supposed to hear anything in this house," she said. "It's made of silence." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I meant what I said last night. This morning, I was wrong. You were cruel. I know. And that baby. Your baby. She knows who's gentle." He nodded. "I'd like to start over," he said. She didn't answer. Instead, Sylvie went upstairs, rocked Ivy in her arms, and hummed the lullaby she hadn't sung in years. That evening, while Sylvie sewed a torn seam on a couch pillow, Mrs. Amanda approached her. "You're not like the others." Sylvie didn't look up. "What others? The ones who come here for the money or the prestige? They last 2 weeks, maybe 3, then they're gone. But you?" She paused. "She only sleeps in your arms. She's just a baby. She's not just a baby. She's a mirror, Mrs. Amanda said, and she sees who you are." Sylvie looked up finally. "Who am I then?" Mrs. Amanda gave a thin smile. "Someone who deserves to stay." The words hit harder than Sylvie expected. She looked back at the pillow and stitched in silence. 2 days later, as snow fell steadily outside, Jaden asked Sylvie to come to his office. She entered cautiously. The office was clean, clinical modern desk, wall-mounted screens, chrome bookshelves. "I want to show you something," he said. On the screen, a wireframe of an app, bright colors, icons, labels, a tab that read, "Single Mum Support." "What is this?" "My next project, a digital hub for single mothers. Resources, legal aid, childcare options." I started it after Anthony left. But the team, most of them are men. They don't understand what's really needed. Sylvie crossed her arms. "And you think I do?" He looked at her directly. "I think you understand what it's like to be left behind, and I think that makes you the most qualified person in this house." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm not a tech expert. I don't need one," he replied. "I need someone who knows what it feels like to matter too late." That night, Sylvie lay awake in her room. The snow kept falling. She remembered her foster homes, the basement in the Bronx, the clients who never said thank you, the men who shouted, and the women who looked the other way. And now here she was being asked not to sweep the floor, but to build something real. She turned toward the crib where Ivy was sleeping in a room just down the hall. For the first time in a long time, Sylvie let herself feel the possibility of a future. Not one where she escaped, but one where she stayed. for her and for the little girl who only slept when Sylvie was near. 3 days later, Sylvia stood in front of the massive oak door of Jaden's study, heart pounding. "Come in!" his voice called from inside before she could knock. She opened the door slowly. Jaden was at his desk, sleeves rolled, his tie undone. The usual sharpness in his posture had softened. Next to his laptop were several printouts, sketches, and sticky notes, most of them in a color she didn't recognize. Then she realized they were hers. He gestured to the seat across from him. "I've been reviewing your notes. You think like someone who's been on the other side of the system." I have," she said, taking the seat. "I want to implement the anonymous forum feature you suggested for moms, afraid to speak openly." Sylvie nodded. "Good. Some women, especially the younger ones, they'll never raise their hand in public, but they might type if they're alone in the dark and scared." He was quiet for a moment. "You know," he said, "I built my entire company around solving real problems. Renewable energy, sustainable homes, carbon tracking. And still miss the human ones," Sylvie said gently. Jaden smiled. "A small, tired thing. Yeah, turns out you can't code your way out of loneliness." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The winter light slanted through the tall window, casting soft lines across the dark desk. Sylvie studied the papers in front of her, then looked up again. "I'll help," she said, "but I want to be involved, not as a consultant or assistant, as a voice." "You already are." "No," she said firmer. "You said you wanted to start over. This is how it begins. You don't just ask for insight when it's convenient. You build from trust." He met her eyes. "Deal." Later that evening, Sylvie stepped into the nursery and found Ivy standing in her crib barefoot, cheeks flushed, babbling toward the door as if she'd known Sylvie was coming. The moment Sylvie walked in, the little girl reached out both arms. "Hi there," Sylvie whispered, scooping her up. "Did you miss me, troublemaker?" Ivy buried her face in Sylvie's neck with a tiny sigh. Sylvie settled with her into the rocking chair by the window. Snow had returned, blanketing the pine trees outside. She rocked slowly, humming the same tune from that first night. Ivy was heavier now, sleepier, more at peace. Mrs. Amanda appeared in the doorway minutes later, a steaming mug in hand. "You look like you needed this," she said, offering the tea. Sylvie smiled. "You read mine now?" "No, just faces." "Yours is easier than you think." They sat in silence while Ivy dozed off again. "You're different," Mrs. Amanda said finally. "Since you started helping with the app, I'm not just folding laundry anymore. Number your scene, and that's something many of us wait our whole lives for." Sylvie nodded slowly. "I'm still getting used to it." "You'll never get used to it," Mrs. Amanda said. "But you'll start believing it." That night, as Sylvie returned to her room, she found something unexpected on her bed. A book, small and cloth-bound. No note, no tag, just a single blue ribbon tied around it. She opened it. "You deserve to be more than someone who survives." Her fingers paused on the handwritten inscription. It wasn't Rose's handwriting, and it sure as hell wasn't Mrs. Amanda's bride. She closed the book and sat down on the edge of the bed, heart loud in her chest. Over the next week, things shifted in small, nearly invisible ways. Jaden started eating breakfast in the dining room again. Not every day, but more than before. When he passed Sylvie in the hallway, he didn't look through her. He looked at her. Ivy grew more attached, reaching for Sylvie before anyone else, laughing when she entered the room, refusing food unless Sylvie sat beside her. Sylvie tried not to read too far into it until one night while going over the app features in the study. Jaden asked, "What did you want to be when you were younger?" Sylvie blinked. "You mean before my life started breaking things?" He didn't smile. "I mean it," he said. She looked at her hands. "A nurse? Then maybe a teacher? Then neither. I realized early that the world doesn't hand out jobs to people like me. So I learned to mop floors and stitch buttons." "You do more than stitch buttons." Sylvie raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment." "Yes." She gave him a small, reluctant smile. "And you?" she asked. "What did you want to be?" Jaden hesitated. "A husband," he said finally. "A good one. and a father that didn't feel like a stranger in his own home. Silence filled the room. Sylvie's voice softened. You're not a stranger to her. Not anymore. He looked down at the table. She laughs when you walk in, Jaden. That's not nothing, he exhaled. You call me Jaden now. You said we were starting over. He looked up at her, and for the first time since she met him, Sylvie saw something exposed, unarmored, raw. I'm trying, he said quietly. She nodded. So am I. A few nights later, the generator cut out for 2 hours during a snowstorm. Most of the staff had gone home early due to the weather. It was just Sylvie, Jaden, and Ivy in the house. Sylvie found him in the kitchen barefoot, shirt sleeves rolled, trying to boil water with a camping stove. You look ridiculous, she said. I'm aware. She moved beside him, grabbed the second pot. Let me. He stepped back. You always know what to do, he said. No, she replied, but I always do something. That's the difference. A pauser. She cried less this week. Because you stopped looking at her like a responsibility, Sylvie said. You started holding her like she mattered. Jaden nodded slowly. Thank you, Sylvie. For what? For not leaving? She looked at him long and level. I almost did, she said twice. What stopped you? She smiled faintly. She held on to me. Even when I couldn't hold myself. The wind howled outside. The stove hissed. And in the dim light, something between them steadied. Not fragile. Not forced. Just there. Quiet. Growing. The snowstorm lasted through the weekend. By Monday morning, the world outside the Johnson estate was buried under 2 feet of silence. Even the pine trees looked bent, their shoulders sagging beneath the weight of winter. Inside, the house was unusually warm. Fireplaces lit, soft jazz echoing faintly through the hallways. Sylvie stood in the nursery, swaddling Ivy after her morning bath. The baby's cheeks rosy from steam and giggles. You're getting so big, Sylvie murmured, tucking the blanket beneath Ivy's chin. Soon you'll be bossing all of us around. Ivy cooed in reply, her fingers finding Sylvie's braid and tugging gently. Unstairs, Jaden sat at the breakfast table, stirring his coffee, but not drinking it. He glanced up every few seconds toward the staircase, as if waiting for something, or someone expecting a call. Mrs. Amanda asked, setting down a plate of toast. Number just thinking she didn't press. Years working for the Johnson family had taught her which silences were meant to be left alone. A few minutes later, Sylvie entered the room with Ivy on her hip. Jaden stood up too quickly. You're here, he said. Sylvie raised an eyebrow. You invited me for breakfast. Thought it'd be rude to ignore. He gestured to the seat beside him. Please. She placed Ivy into the high chair already waiting between them, then slid into the seat. For a moment, the 3 of them sat there like any other family. Quiet, comfortable, unremarkable. And for Sylvie, that was the strangest feeling of all. Ivy dropped a spoon. Sylvie bent to pick it up. When she looked up, Jaden was watching her, not with intensity, but attention. What? She asked. Nothing, he said, though his expression said otherwise. After breakfast, Jaden followed Sylvie to the nursery. She didn't mind. Ivy had fallen asleep mid-play, her tiny arms wrapped around a stuffed bear Sylvie had sewn back together last week. She's grown fast, he said, glancing at the crib. Babies do that when they're safe, Sylvie replied, gently straightening the blanket. Jaden leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. I've been thinking about expanding the app, adding a section for caretakers, nannies, foster parents, even volunteers, people like you. I'm not like them, Sylvie said, not looking up. Most of them get to go home. He paused. What if this became home? She turned slowly. What are you saying? I'm saying, he hesitated. You've become more than part of the staff. You're part of this place, of Ivy's life, of mine. Sylvie stood straighter. Her voice was even. Are you offering me a job or a future? He blinked, caught off guard. I'm offering a choice to stay. Not because of obligation, but because you belong here. Sylvie studied him, her gaze sharp. You can't say things like that without knowing what they mean. I do, he said quietly. And I'm not asking for an answer today. She nodded. Good, because I don't have one. Later that evening, Sylvie found herself standing alone in the library. The fire crackled low, casting long shadows across the bookshelves. She wandered between them, fingertips brushing the spines, stopping only when she found the small cloth-bound book from her bed, the one with the ribbon. She opened it again. You deserve to be more than someone who survives. The handwriting was unmistakably Jaden's. She closed the book, held it to her chest. Behind her the door creaked open. You left this, his voice said. I know, Sylvie replied without turning. He stepped inside, his tone careful. I wrote it before I was ready to say it out loud. And now I'm trying to be a man who says the right things before it's too late. Sylvie turned to face him. I've been in too many rooms where people said the right things, but none of them stayed. I will, he said, if you'll let me. She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders softened. Then stay, she said, but not just when the fire is lit and the room is quiet. Stay when it's cold, when it's messy, when Ivy's teething and I'm tired and your schedule is a mess. I will, he said again. Sylvie nodded once. That's a start. That night, Ivy woke up crying around 2 a.m. Sylvie was already halfway to the nursery when she heard it. But when she opened the door, Jaden was there, cradling Ivy in his arms, gently bouncing her, whispering a lullaby Sylvie had sung 100 times. He didn't see her at first, but when he did, he didn't flinch. He just kept rocking. She wouldn't settle at first, he whispered. Then I remembered your hum, the rhythm. I tried it. I think it worked. Sylvie walked in slowly, standing beside him. You're doing fine, she said. He looked down at the baby, then back at Sylvie. So are you. And in the quiet nursery, beneath the sound of the wind outside and the soft breath of a child at peace, Sylvie realized something terrifying and beautiful. She was no longer waiting to be seen. She already was. Tea started with laughter. Not loud, not forced, just soft, surprised, and utterly unplanned. Sylvie was carrying Ivy through the hallway when the little girl sneezed so dramatically it startled a nearby cat statue into tipping over. The ancient thing wobbled, teetered, and fell with a thud onto the carpet. Ivy burst out laughing, and Sylvie, after a stunned beat, joined her. Mrs. Amanda poked her head out from the kitchen, eyebrows raised. Was that what I think it was? I think the lion's dead, Sylvie said deadpan. The housekeeper's mouth twitched. Well, at least she's happy. She's been smiling more lately, Sylvie said. Sleeping better, too. She's sensing the shift, Mrs. Amanda replied. Babies know more than most grown-ups do. Sylvie looked down at Ivy, who was now trying to grab her necklace. Yeah, she murmured. She knows. Later that day, Jaden knocked on the nursery door. Sylvie looked up from where she sat on the floor, stacking colored blocks with Ivy. You're knocking now. I'm learning, he said slowly. She smiled faintly. Come in. He stepped inside with 2 mugs in hand. I made coffee. You made coffee? Sylvie repeated, skeptical. It might be terrible. She took the mug. If I die, Marin will avenge me. He smiled, settled down beside her, legs folded like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ivy beamed and crawled right into his lap. Every time I see her do that, Sylvie said quietly. I wonder how long she waited to feel that safe. He looked at the baby, now content, and tugging at his sleeve. I think I waited just as long. They sat there for a while, all 3 of them, the silence not awkward, but warm. The blocks toppled. Ivy clapped. And for a moment, the world outside didn't matter until it did. It was just after sunset when the phone rang sharp, shrill, demanding. Jaden answered in the hallway. Sylvie could hear his voice. Low but tense, though she couldn't make out the words. When he returned, his face was different, closed, controlled. What is it? She asked. He hesitated. Anthony's coming. Sylvie's fingers froze mid-fold over Ivy's blanket. Anthony. She wants to see Ivy. Sylvie's voice dropped. Why now? I don't know, he said. She didn't say much, just that she's in town and wants to talk. When? Tomorrow. Sylvie nodded once stiffly. Right. Jaden stepped closer. Sylvie, No, she said. It's fine. She's Ivy's mother. I didn't say that to hurt you. You didn't have to, she replied. It's just the truth. That night Sylvie didn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, the baby monitor beside her bed humming softly. Every so often, she'd glance at it as if expecting Ivy to disappear. In the morning, she dressed Ivy in a soft yellow sweater, the one with the embroidered sun on the pocket. She brushed her tiny curls and hummed as she worked, but her fingers shook. Jaden found her in the nursery, silent and still, holding Ivy longer than usual. You okay? He asked. She looks like her, Sylvie said. Same eyes. She's not her, he said. No, Sylvie replied. She's better. The front doorbell rang. Anthony Miller stood in the entryway like a woman out of a magazine, tall, poised, wrapped in a caramel-colored coat, curls perfectly arranged. Her smile was hesitant, almost shy. I, she said softly. Jaden nodded. Anthony. Sylvie didn't speak. Anthony's eyes drifted toward Ivy, who clung tightly to Ma's shirt. She's gotten big, Anthony whispered. May I? Marja hesitated. Jaden stepped forward. Let me. He took Ivy carefully from Ma's arms. The baby whimpered, not quite crying but clearly uneasy. Anthony opened her arms, and Jaden handed the child over. For a brief moment, it looked like something from a picture, a mother and child. Soft light, familiar touch. But then Ivy began to cry. A soft whimper at first, then louder, more panicked. Anthony tried to see her. Shh. It's okay, baby girl. Mommy's here. Ivy screamed. Jaden stepped in, but it was Sylvie who moved first. She reached out instinctively. Ivy. The baby reached back, trembling, tears running down her face. Sylvie took her, held her close. Within seconds, the cries quieted into hiccups. Anthony stood frozen. She doesn't know me, she said, voice breaking. She knows who stayed, Sylvie said softly. Jaden didn't say anything. Anthony turned to him. I shouldn't have come. You wanted to see her. I thought it would feel different, Anthony said. But you already have a family. She looked at Sylvie. I didn't expect you. I didn't expect that either, Sylvie said, not unkindly. Anthony's shoulders dropped. I don't know where I belong anymore. Jaden's voice was calm. That's not something I can answer for you, Anthony nodded. I'll go. She walked toward the door, then paused. She's happy, Anthony said. I didn't think I'd be relieved by that, but I am. And then she was gone. The silence in the foyer was heavy. Sylvie stood there. Ivy is still clinging to her. I didn't mean to say that, she whispered. About knowing who stayed. It needed to be said, Jaden replied. He stepped closer. She doesn't just need love. She needs consistency. You've been her whole world. Sylvie looked down at the little girl in her arms. I'm afraid I don't know how to be a mother, she said. Neither do I, he admitted. But maybe we're learning together. Sylvie glanced up at him. And what are we to each other, Jaden? His answer was quiet, firm. We're the people who didn't run. And in that moment, standing in the quiet warmth of the entryway, holding a child who had stopped crying, Sylvie understood that she wasn't a visitor anymore. She was home. The following morning began with golden sunlight pouring through the frosted windows of the nursery, casting soft halos around the edges of the crib. Ivy was still asleep, curled on her side, one chubby fist tucked beneath her cheek, the yellow sweater Sylvie had chosen yesterday, still warm from the night. Sylvie sat quietly beside her, knees pulled to her chest on the rocking chair, coffee in hand, but it had long gone cold. Downstairs, the house moved with a quiet rhythm. Maren was humming in the kitchen. Somewhere, Mrs. Amanda was organizing linens like she always did on Thursdays. Jaden hadn't come down yet, or maybe he had, and Sylvie simply didn't hear. She hadn't left the nursery since Anthony walked out that door the day before. She hadn't been able to. Her chest still felt too full, too unsure. Everything Anthony had brought with her questions, memories, silence. It still lingered in the corners of the room, like perfume that didn't belong. She brushed a curl off Ivy's forehead and whispered, You okay, sunshine? Ivy shifted, made a soft noise, then returned to sleep. Sylvie closed her eyes. The silence held. Then a quiet knock on the nursery door. Yeah, she said. Jaden stepped in holding 2 fresh mugs of coffee. This one's not poison, he said. That's a shame, Sylvie replied. Might have needed it. He offered her the mug. She took it, but didn't drink right away. He sat on the rug, arms resting on his knees like he had nowhere more important to be in the world. You didn't sleep, he said. I was afraid I'd wake up and she'd be gone. Oh. Jaden looked towards the crib. She's not. I know, but my body doesn't. A pause then yesterday, what you said to Anthony about who stayed. Sylvie shifted. I shouldn't have said it in front of Ivy. You were right, Jaden said. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt. She didn't come back to take her, he said. She came back to see if she's still fit, and she realized she didn't. Sylvie looked down at the rim of her cup. You okay? He asked. I don't know, but I'm still here. That counts for a lot. She looked at him now fully. His hair was a little tousled, like he hadn't even glanced in a mirror. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were soft. You've changed, she said. He blinked. How so? You used to stand like you own the room. Now you sit, like you want to belong in it. Jaden exhaled a small laugh. You make me sound like a stray dog. You were. They both smiled. Then Ivy stirred, stretching like a kitten waking from a dream. Her eyes blinked open, searching the room, and when they landed on Sylvie, her face lit up. Hey there, Sylvie whispered, standing and leaning over the crib. Ivy reached up, and Sylvie, without hesitation, picked her up and held her tight. Later that afternoon, Jaden asked Sylvie to join a virtual team meeting for the app. She hesitated at first. Sitting in on a call with engineers, designers, and business strategists wasn't exactly what she signed up for, but he insisted. They need a perspective they don't have, he said. You bring that. Sylvie sat beside him at his desk, still holding Ivy, who nodded contentedly on a rubber giraffe. On the screen, 6 squares lit up young professionals in sleek glasses and polished backgrounds. They looked like they lived in cities where coffee cost $8 and time was currency. Sylvie, Jaden said, addressing the team, has agreed to help us shape the community section. She'll be leading user insights. There was a pause. Then a woman named Carly said, You're the one who suggested anonymous forums, right? That's been our most requested feature since soft launch. Sylvie blinked. Yes, I guess that was me. Another voice chimed in. The way you framed it, that moms don't always have time or mental bandwidth to type long posts, that sometimes they just need to press a button and feel seen. That really helped us rework the interface. Sylvie blinked again. I just said what I wish I'd had. The call continued, more technical now, but Sylvie stayed. She took notes. She asked questions. And when it ended, Jaden turned to her. Well, that was terrifying, she said. But also it felt like I mattered. You do, he said. That night, Jaden cooked dinner, or tried to. Sylvie entered the kitchen to the smell of something burning and the sight of him fanning smoke away from the stove. Is that supposed to be lasagna? She asked. No, he said quickly. It's a learning experience. She laughed. Move over. Together. They salvaged what they could. Sylvie added seasoning. Jaden opened a bottle of wine. Ivy sat in her high chair, nibbling on bits of toast, watching them like they were a sitcom. After dinner, they sat around the fireplace. Sylvie rocked Ivy in her arms, her breathing already slowing. Jaden handed her a blanket. She feels safe here, Sylvie said. She's not the only one, he replied. Sylvie looked up. I want this to last, he said. Not just the app, not just the way Ivy stopped crying at night. I want this life to mean something. She hesitated. And if I told you I don't trust permanence, I'd say I don't either. But I trust you. And I trust that we're not where we were. That has to be enough for now. Sylvie looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, then backed up at the man in front of her. It might be. Jaden nodded slowly. Good. Sylvie leaned back, the warmth of the fire curling around her like a slow breath. In her chest, something quiet, unnoded. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't surviving. She was beginning. Spring arrived early that year. The snow melted fast, revealing soft grass beneath the pines and crooked stone paths long buried in white. The windows of the Johnson estate no longer wept frost. Instead, they opened. The house began to breathe again. So did the ad Sylvie. Each morning sunlight spilled into the nursery like a promise. Ivy woke happier, louder, more curious. Her giggles bounced off the walls. She'd begun walking half steps, uncertain, but determined always towards Sylvie. Jaden started coming home earlier, sometimes with paper bags full of groceries or forgotten hardware for the crib. He wasn't the same man who'd once shouted across the living room like Sylvie was an intruder. That man had vanished somewhere between late-night lullabies and shared silence. One Thursday afternoon, Sylvie stood at the laundry line in the garden, pinning up Ivy's tiny sweaters. The air smelled of soil and daffodils. A radio played faintly from the kitchen town, the kind Marin. I liked it. Sylvie swayed slightly as she worked, humming along, the clothes fluttering like little flags. "Sylvie," Jaden's voice called from behind her. She turned, squinting against the sun. "I need your eyes on something." He stood on the back patio, barefoot, sleeves rolled to his elbows, holding a tablet in one hand and a bottle of juice in the other. "Juice for the boss," he added, holding it up. She laughed. "Ivy or me?" "You. Ivy already bit me once today. I've learned my lesson." Sylvie followed him inside to study. On the desk, a mock-up of the app's new home screen was open. He angled it toward her. "We're thinking of highlighting real stories anonymously. Of course, mothers, caretakers, people who got through it." Sylvie studied it. "Is there a way to let them leave voice notes?" Jaden looked surprised. "Why?" "Because sometimes it's easier to speak than write, especially if you're crying." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll have the dev team work on that." They sat together on the leather couch while Ivy crawled around them on the carpet, babbling to a stuffed giraffe. Sylvie sipped her juice barefoot, legs curled beneath her. "Do you ever think," Jaden began, "that we stumbled into this? This is us, her, the app, all of it. I think the world gave us a second chance," Sylvie said. "The first one we both wasted." He tilted his head. "How'd you waste yours?" "I stopped believing in people." Jaden's voice dropped. "Me too." Pa. But you didn't stop believing in her," she said, nodding to Ivy. He looked at the child on the floor. "I just didn't know how to show it." "You do now." He turned back to Sylvie. "Because of you." Sylvie looked down into her cup. "You say things like that, then I have to go back to my room and remember how to breathe." "I'm working on that part too," he said with a soft smile. "Making sure you don't have to go back to your room alone." She blinked. "I mean," he added quickly, "not the way that sounded. I mean, you don't have to retreat when you feel something." "Not from me." Sylvie said nothing, but her hand, resting near his on the couch, drifted a fraction closer. Close enough that their fingers nearly touched. Later that evening, Sylvie walked Ivy around the garden in a sling, while the baby hummed nonsense against her shoulder. The air was cool, gentle. In the distance, the wind danced through the pines. Mrs. Amanda watched from the porch, arms crossed loosely. When Sylvie approached, she nodded toward the house. "I saw the mock-ups." Jaden showed me. "Oh," Sylvie asked, shifting Ivy's weight. "They're good, real. I've seen a lot of projects start in that study. None of them ever felt this human." Sylvie smiled. "He's different now," Mrs. Amanda snorted. "He's in love." Sylvie nearly tripped. "What?" "Oh, don't play dumb. I've worked in this house long enough to know the look." I don't know what you're talking about," Sylvie said quickly. "Then, let me put it this way," Mrs. Amanda said. "He only uses the good coffee mugs when you're in the room. You don't waste ceramic that costs $70 apiece unless you're trying to impress someone." Sylvie opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. "I'm just trying to do right by Ivy." "Of course," the older woman said, "but don't pretend like love's not blooming around here faster than the flowers." That night after dinner, Jaden walked Sylvie to her room. Ivy had already fallen asleep in her crib. The hallway was quiet, lit only by the amber glow of the wall sconces. They paused at her door. "I'm flying to New York next week," he said. "Meeting investors. They want updates on the app." Sylvie nodded. "Will you be gone long?" 3 days. "Ivy won't like that." "I won't either," he said. Then, after a pause, "Would you come with us?" Sylvie blinked. "What? Just for the trip?" "You'd be in the meetings as the voice of the users and with Ivy, of course." "I don't have a suit," she said automatically. "I'll buy you one. I don't have experience." "You've lived the experience." She hesitated. That's a lot of change. He nodded. It is, but not all change is lost, Sylvie. She looked at him. Really looked. The man who once shouted at her for daring to touch what he loved now stood before her, asking her to carry it forward with him. I'll think about it, she said. He leaned slightly forward. Not too close. Just enough. I'll wait. And with that, he turned and walked down the hall. Sylvie stepped into her room, shut the door, and stood in the silence. Her heart was pounding, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The private jet hummed gently beneath them like a lullaby wrapped in steel. Sylvie sat across from Jaden in the cream leather cabin. The soft overhead lighting casts a warm glow. Ivy was curled up in Mia's lap, thumb tucked in her mouth, her curls haloed by a tiny travel pillow shaped like a giraffe. Jaden hadn't said much since takeoff. He kept glancing over, watching Sylvie as she stroked Ivy's back, calm and steady, like she'd done it for years. There was something in the way Sylvie existed with quiet command, not needing permission to be tender. You okay? He finally asked. She nodded, just taking it all in. Your first time flying? She gave a soft laugh. First time flying private. First time flying with a billionaire. First time flying anywhere. I wasn't escaping from something. Jaden studied her. This time you're heading towards something. Sylvie didn't reply. She just looked down at Ivy and kissed the top of her head. In New York, the hotel suite was nothing short of absurd glass walls. A piano no one played. A kitchen larger than most apartments. Sylvie stood frozen in the center of it. Ivy now awake in her arms, looking just as stunned. I don't know what to touch, Sylvie whispered. Jaden chuckled. That's okay. Everything here's insured. Ivy pointed to the piano. Whoa. She thinks every piano is a water fountain, and Ma said, the keys look like tiles. Jaden knelt beside them. Let's teach her the difference. Then he lifted Ivy up to the piano bench, sat her in his lap, and began playing a soft melody, halting, unsure. Sylvie stepped back and watched the two of them, the way Ivy leaned against his chest, how his eyes never left her face. The song wasn't perfect, but the moment was. Later that night, after Ivy had fallen asleep in the crib set up in the master bedroom, Sylvie stepped onto the balcony. The city below blinked and buzzed, a living ocean of movement. She hugged her cardigan tighter around her. Jaden joined her quietly, 2 glasses of tea in hand. I thought you didn't drink, she said. Still don't. It's her mama. He handed her a glass. They stood in silence for a few moments, watching headlights snake through the streets. Did I tell you why I started the app? He asked suddenly. Sylvie shook her head. My wife Ivy's mom was diagnosed late. Very late. She'd been depressed for over a year, but we didn't see it. I was too busy flying around making money. I thought I was doing it for them. Sylvie stayed quiet, letting him speak. She left us one morning, walked out before sunrise, and never came back. They found her body 2 days later near a lake. He sipped his tea. I kept thinking if we'd had something like this, something anonymous where she could have spoken without shame, maybe she'd still be here. I'm sorry, Sylvie said. She was kind in a way that scared people, because when someone sees you that deeply, you either open up or run. He turned to her. You remind me of her, not in appearance, in heart. Ma's breath caught. I don't say that lightly, he added, but watching you with Ivy, watching you care for someone that isn't yours, like she's blood that's not ordinary. She is mine, Sylvie said softly. Not by blood, maybe, but by everything else. He smiled. I think she'd say the same. They stood there a little longer. Then Jaden looked down at the street and said, You ever think about what you want? I mean, really want? I used to, she said. Then life taught me not to. Well, he said, maybe it's time you start again. The next morning, Sylvie sat at a polished conference table in a glass tower high above the streets. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Around her sat men and women in suits, all sharp collars and sharper tongues. Jaden sat at the head of the table. Before we talk numbers, he began, I want to introduce someone. All eyes turned. This is Sylvie Pratt. She's the reason this app has meaning. Mia's heart thudded. She didn't come from Silicon Valley. She didn't study code. She didn't intern with Google. But she knows something most of us forgot. How it feels to be invisible and how powerful it is when someone finally sees you. He turned to her. Sylvie. She stood slowly. Her voice wavered at first. I used to think survival was the goal, she began. That if you could get through the day without crying or breaking or begging, you were doing okay. She looked at them, these people with their pens and spreadsheets. But surviving isn't living. And most of the people you want to reach with this app, they're not living. They're enduring. What they need isn't more features. It's more humanity. She sat down. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon the whole table was applauding. After the meeting, Jaden walked beside her in the hallway. You just closed the deal, he said. I thought that was your job. It was until now. He paused. I don't want you to be the nanny anymore. Sylvie stopped walking. What? I want you to be head of community development. Full salary, full benefits, your own team. She blinked. You're serious? As a heart attack. I've never even run an office. You've run a household. You've managed crises. You've spoken truth to power. That's more than most CEOs can say. He stepped closer. I see you, Sylvie. All of you. She swallowed hard. And if you say yes, this city will see you too. Sylvie looked out at the skyline through the massive windows. New York had always been the place where dreams were too expensive for girls like her. But maybe not anymore. Okay, she said quietly. And for the first time in her life, the word okay felt like the start of everything. The office door clicked shut behind her. Sylvie stood in the center of her new workspace. A corner suite wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass. The view stretched across Manhattan, glittering in the late afternoon sun. A leather chair, a wide walnut desk, a nameplate already engraved. Sylvie Pratt, head of community development. She sat slowly, hands hovering over the desk's polished surface. Just days ago, she'd been folding laundry in a stranger's mansion, sleeping on the floor beside a toddler. Now she had an office bigger than the apartment she grew up in. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she said. Jaden stepped in, holding 2 coffees. You still drink it with a splash of oat milk? Sylvie smiled. You remembered? He handed her the cup. You start tomorrow officially, but I wanted you to see it first. It's yours now. She turned back toward the window. It doesn't feel real. Give it time, he said. You'll be running this building by fall. Sylvie chuckled. Let me learn the printer first. He laughed, but his tone softened. You earned this, Sylvie. Don't ever doubt that. I'm trying not to, she whispered. The next morning, Sylvie arrived early. She wore a simple navy dress and flats, her hair pulled into a neat bun. Ivy had cried when she left the hotel room only for a moment, but it had pierced her heart like a shard of glass. Jaden had kissed Ivy's cheek and told her Mummy Sylvie would be back soon. The words had stayed with her all day. At 8 a.m., sharp, her new assistant Carla walked in. Good morning, Miss Pratt, she said briskly. Here's your schedule. First meetings at 9, then a walkthrough with legal, then press. Sylvie blinked. Press? Carla smiled. You're the heart of the story. Everyone wants to meet the woman behind the app. Okay. Sylvie took a breath. Let's do it. The morning flew by. At the 9 a.m. meeting, she spoke about expanding community outreach, creating a platform for unheard voices, building trust before building tech. The room nodded, took notes. At noon, she met with legal, discussing policies to protect vulnerable users. By 100 p.m., she hadn't eaten, but she felt electrified. And then came the press. A soft-spoken woman with a notepad and sharp eyes sat across from her in the lounge. Miss Pratt, she said, can you tell me what this opportunity means to you? Sylvie hesitated, then leaned forward. I've been invisible for most of my life, she said. Poor, homeless, cleaning homes for people who wouldn't look me in the eye. So this, she gestured to the office, this isn't just a job. It's a second chance. Maybe a first. And what do you hope to do with it? I want to build something that reaches people like the girl I used to be. Sylvie said people who've been dismissed, forgotten, abused. I want them to know their stories matter, that someone's listening. The reporter nodded, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Sylvie returned to the hotel exhausted. She opened the door quietly, but Ivy's voice rang out from the other room. "Sylvie." The little girl came running barefoot, arms wide, crashing into Sylvie's legs. "Hey, baby," Sylvie whispered, lifting her. "Did you have fun today?" Ivy nodded. "Daddy made pancakes. But I missed you." Sylvie kissed her cheek. "I missed you more." Jaden appeared in the doorway, holding a pan with a smile. "There's one left if you're lucky." Sylvie laughed. "Starving." Over dinner, they talked like a family. Jaden asked about her meetings. Ivy interrupted with stories about cartoons and crayons. Sylvie listened, spoke, smiled, and something inside her ached with how natural it felt. After Ivy fell asleep, Sylvie lingered in the kitchen rinsing dishes. "You don't have to do that," Jaden said. She shrugged. "Habit." He leaned against the counter. "How was your first day?" "Incredible, overwhelming, empowering, all of it. I'm proud of you." She looked up startled. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." He stepped closer. "You changed everything, Sylvie. For Ivy? For this company? For me?" She didn't answer, but their eyes locked and something passed between them, wordless, undeniable. A week later, Sylvie sat in her office when Carla knocked. "Miss Pratt, there's a visitor." "Who?" Carla stepped aside, revealing a tall, well-dressed woman in her 50s. "Sylvie," the woman said. Sylvie stood, her heart freezing. "Mom." The woman walked in, eyes darting around. "You work here. This is yours." Sylvie nodded slowly. "Why are you here?" "I saw you on the news," her mother said. "They said you were helping people. That you built something big." "I didn't build it alone," Sylvie said. "But yes." Her mother stepped closer. "I came to say I am proud and to ask if we can talk." "Start again." Sylvie's chest tightened. "You threw me out when I was 16. I was scared. You were stubborn. We both made mistakes." Sylvie glanced at the photo on her desk, Ivy grinning in her lap. "I can't rewrite the past number, but maybe we can write something new." A long silence followed. Then Sylvie nodded. "We can talk," she said. Her mother smiled, eyes misting. "Thank you." After she left, Sylvie sat at her desk, trembling. Jaden called minutes later. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so. Want company?" She paused. "Come pick me up." Evening, the three of them, Sylvie, Jaden, and Ivy, walked through Central Park. The trees were glowing with fairy lights strung for the spring festival. Sylvie held Ivy's hand in one, Jaden's in the other. "You know," he said, "I never imagined any of this when I hired a nanny." She laughed. "And I never imagined falling in love with a billionaire." His smile faded. "Are you?" She looked at him, heart hurting. "I think I already have," she said. He stopped walking. Then he leaned in gently and kissed her forehead. "I have too," he said. And in that soft golden light, with the world still spinning around them, Sylvie felt something she hadn't felt in years home. The morning air carried the smell of fresh bagels and blooming tulips as Sylvie stepped out of the black SUV and walked toward the gleaming glass entrance of Grayson Industries. She held Ivy's small hand tightly in hers. The child wore a yellow sundress and sneakers, her backpack bouncing with each step. "Remember what I said?" Sylvie asked, kneeling to her eye level. Ivy nodded. "I'll stay with Miss Carla until you're done with your meetings. No wandering, no snacks from strangers, no yelling unless it's an emergency." Sylvie smiled, brushing a curl from Ivy's forehead. "That's my girl." Jaden watched from a few steps back, sipping his coffee, trying to appear calm. But the circles under his eyes betrayed him. "She still didn't sleep?" Sylvie asked. He shook his head, cried until 3. Woke up every hour asking where you were. Ma's heart twisted. "She's been through too much change." Jaden's voice dropped. "So have you." Their eyes met. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Carla appeared at the door, waving. "Miss Pratt, they're all waiting in conference room B." Sylvie gave Ivy one last hug, then stood tall. "Let's go make a difference." Inside, the air was cooler, sterile, but buzzing with anticipation. Today was the launch of the Unity project, a tech initiative Sylvie had designed to connect marginalized communities with essential services through AI-driven accessibility tools. It was personal, it was powerful, it was hers. The boardroom was full. Executives, journalists, investors, and somewhere near the back, Jeffrey Clean, head of acquisitions, the man who once laughed when she walked into the mansion in hand-me-down shoes. Sylvie stepped to the front, adjusted the mic, and smiled. "Good morning. I'm Sylvie Pratt. Some of you know me as the former maid, the miracle nanny, or the woman who stole a billionaire's car to save a child's life." The room chuckled lightly, unsure if she was serious. "I know who I am," she continued, voice steady. "I'm someone who saw how broken the system was, who heard the cries of people who were told to sit down and stay silent. And I'm not here to fit in. I'm here to build a new table." She clicked the remote. A slide appeared behind her. 2 photos side by side. On the left, a food pantry line stretching for blocks. On the right, a homeless man helping a child read. We don't lack intelligence. We lack access. We don't lack kindness. We lack connection. And unity will change that. The presentation lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, the room stood in applause. Some genuine, some performative. But it didn't matter. Sylvie had planted her flag. As the crowd dispersed, Jaden approached. "You crushed it," he said. Sylvie exhaled, her hands still trembling. "I was shaking the whole time." He grinned. No one saw that. They saw a leader. They walked back to her office together. Carla met them at the door, eyes wide. "Miss Pratt, we have a situation." Sylvie tensed. "What kind of situation?" "It's Ivy. She's missing." Sylvie's world tilted. "What?" She was coloring beside my desk. I turned to answer a call. When I looked again, she was gone. Sylvie was already moving. "Check every floor, every hallway, every exit." Jaden pulled out his phone. "I'm calling building security. Have them lock all doors now." Panic clawed at her throat. Not again. Not Ivy. The next hour passed in a blur of running feet, radio crackles, and shouted names. Sylvie checked every restroom, every lounge, every corner of every floor. No sign. Then a voice on the security radio crackled through. "We found her. Rooftop. She's with someone." Sylvie bolted for the elevator. The door opened to the rooftop garden, usually off limits. Wind whipped through her curls as she sprinted toward the benches. There by the railing stood Ivy, and kneeling beside her was Jeffrey Clean. Sylvie's heart stopped. "Ivy." The girl turned startled but unharmed. Jeffrey stood, hands raised. "She found her way up here. I swear I just sat with her." Sylvie rushed forward, scooped Ivy into her arms. "Baby, are you okay? I wanted to see the flowers." Ivy whispered like at the park. Sylvie held her tight, glaring at Jeffrey. "Don't ever get near her again." He raised his hands. "I didn't touch her. I was waiting with her until someone came." Jaden appeared behind them, eyes burning. "If I ever see you speak to my daughter again, you won't just be fired. You'll be erased." Jeffrey backed away. Message received. Later, back in the hotel, Sylvie sat beside Ivy on the bed, brushing her hair gently. "I scared you," Ivy whispered. Sylvie nodded. "A lot, but I'm glad you're safe." Ivy looked up. "You're not mad?" "I was scared, not mad. But promise me you'll never run off like that again." "I promise." That night, after Ivy was asleep, Sylvie stood by the window. Jaden joined her, placing a hand on her back. "She's okay," he said. Sylvie nodded. "I know, but something's off." He looked at her. "What do you mean?" "That man, Jeffrey? He didn't just find her. The rooftop is locked. You need a code." Jaden's jaw tightened. "You think he took her there?" "I don't know, but I don't trust him, and I think he's not done." A long silence settled between them. Then Sylvie spoke again. "We need to be ready. He's not the only threat in this building." Jaden nodded. "Whatever happens, we face it together." And in that quiet, with the city glowing beneath them and danger stirring just beyond their reach, the alliance between them hardened into something deeper than loyalty. It became unbreakable. The next morning began too quiet. Sylvie stirred awake in the hotel suite's second bedroom. Still wearing the sweatshirt Jaden had draped over her shoulders the night before. The digital clock on the nightstand, blinked at 6:32 a.m. The sky outside was still a slate grey, not yet awake, but her mind was racing. She sat up immediately, scanning the room. Ivy was curled beside her, small and peaceful, one hand gripping Sylvie's shirt like a lifeline. Her tiny chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Safe for now. Sylvie gently slipped away and padded into the main room where Jaden sat on the couch, coffee in hand, suit half-buttoned. He didn't look up. I called the building manager. He said the rooftop keypad was tampered with. Sylvie stopped cold. Tampered how? By someone who knew the override code. He looked at her now, his jaw clenched. Someone on the inside. She folded her arms across her chest. Jeffrey. Jaden didn't argue. I already spoke to HR, he said. They're opening an investigation, but without hard proof. Hard proof won't show up in polite meetings. Sylvie's voice was low, certain. He knew the access code. That's not an accident. Jaden sighed, rubbing his temples. You're right. But this company's full of politics, Mia. Firing someone like Jeffrey clean without concrete evidence could mean lawsuits, board fights. Sylvie stepped closer. You're the CEO. I wasn't always, he said. And some of those men were building empires while I was still bagging groceries in Baton Rouge. Sylvie blinked. You? He gave a small laugh. Yeah. My mum raised me and my sister by herself. We ate in shifts. I know what it's like to be underestimated. That's why I created unity for people like us. Her voice softened. So don't let someone like Jeffrey poison it. He looked at her. Really looked. Then help me with what? Get close to him. Find out what he's hiding. Off the record, I'll get legal involved quietly. But if he's planning something, anything we need to know before it lands in the press. Sylvie crossed her arms. You want me to spy on him? Number. I want you to protect what you've built. There was a long silence. Then Sylvie nodded. Fine. But if he tries anything with Ivy again, he won't, Jaden said, his voice hard. I promise. Later that day, Sylvie returned to the Grayson Industries campus. Her heels clicked on the marble floor with more weight than usual. Carla met her with a tight smile and a folder. He's in the innovation lab. Asked for you. Sylvie raised an eyebrow. Jeffrey did? Carla hesitated. He said he wanted to apologize. Sylvie didn't answer, just walked. The innovation lab was all glass walls and whiteboards, half Silicon Valley, half science fair. Jeffrey was inside, scribbling on a diagram of new software architecture. When he saw her, he smiled, too wide. Sylvie, he said, lowering the marker. Thanks for coming. She didn't return the smile. You asked for me? He gestured to a chair. Sit. I'll stand. Jeffrey nodded as if expecting it. Look about yesterday. I know it looked bad, but I didn't touch your kid. I swear you shouldn't have been anywhere near her. I know, and I'm sorry. Sylvie watched him closely. You left the board meeting early yesterday. Wasn't feeling well. You had time to override a rooftop security lock. His eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me of something? I'm just connecting dots. Jeffrey chuckled, stepping closer. You know, for a maid-turned-tech saint, you've got quite the bite. Sylvie didn't flinch. And you've got quite the ego for someone under investigation. His smile vanished. You think I'm stupid, Sylvie? He said, voice dropping. You think I don't see what this is? You're sleeping in the boss's penthouse, whispering in his ear, turning his daughter into a pawn. Her hand curled into a fist. You don't belong here, he added. You belong back in the laundry room. Say that again, Sylvie said. But Jeffrey only smirked, turning back to his whiteboard. She walked out, chest tight, breath shallow. Back at her office, Jaden was waiting. He took one look at her face. What happened? He's not sorry, she said. He's planning something, and he's watching us. Jaden shut the door behind them. Then we hid first. He handed her a manila envelope. Inside were documents, financial records, transfers, names. We found an offshore account tied to him, Jaden said. Money moving from one of our subsidiaries to a shell company. If we can trace it to him, it's over. Sylvie flipped through the pages. You think he's embezzling? I think he's stealing more than money. I think he wants unity gone. That night, Sylvie tucked Ivy into bed, but the girl grabbed her hand before she could leave. Sylvie? Yes, sweetie. Why are people so mean sometimes? Sylvie sat beside her, brushing her hair back. Because some people are scared of things they don't understand. Ivy's eyes were wide. Like me? No, baby. You're light. They're scared of what you make them feel. Ivy yawned. Will you stay till I fall asleep? May not always. As she sat beside her, listening to her breathing slow, Sylvie's phone buzzed. A message from Jaden, tomorrow at 7:00 a.m. in the executive boardroom. We confronted him. Sylvie looked at Ivy. Then at the screen she typed back one word. Ready, because she was not just to protect unity, but to protect every child who had ever been left behind, overlooked, or used as a tool by men in suits who thought power meant immunity. They were about to find out justice may be quiet, but it never forgets. The executive boardroom at Grayson Industries was colder than usual. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the silver dawn over Manhattan, casting pale light on the 12 chairs around the glossy obsidian table. Jaden sat at the head. Suit impeccable, expression unreadable. Sylvie stood by the corner wall, arms crossed, holding a thin folder. Her eyes were sharp, but behind them resolve, not anger. Jeffrey strutted in 5 minutes late. He didn't apologize. Morning, he said, sliding into the chair directly across from Jaden. He adjusted his tie like he owned the room. Jaden spoke first. We have some irregularities to discuss. Jeffrey smirked. Must be serious if the cleaning ladies are here. Sylvie didn't react. Not even a blink. Jaden's voice was calm even. We found an offshore account. Buys. 3 months ago. Someone routed company funds through one of our shell subsidiaries. That account was traced back to an IP address from your office computer. Silence. Jeffrey scoffed. This is ridiculous. Jaden slid a document across the table. Wire transfers, timelines, IP logs. Jeffrey didn't touch it. This is a setup. Then explain it, Sylvie said flatly. Explain why your access card was used to override security on the rooftop 3 nights ago. Explain why you were logged in during restricted hours. He looked at her now. Really looked, and for the first time there was a flicker of something behind his eyes. Not fear, calculation. I want a lawyer. Jaden leaned back. You'll get one after this meeting. Jeffrey's jaw twitched. You have no authority to suspend me. I do, Jaden said. Effective immediately. You'll be escorted out. Security is waiting. The boardroom door opened. 2 security officers stepped in, firm but silent. Jeffrey stood slowly, his face pale. Then he laughed a low, bitter sound. You think you've won? This place was built by men like me, not charity cases. He turned toward Sylvie. You're not a leader. You're a distraction. A symbol. A damn headline. Sylvie held his gaze. Symbols last longer than thieves. As the officers flanked him, he turned to Jaden. You'll regret this. No, Jaden said. I regret not doing it sooner. They watched in silence as Jeffrey was let out. The glass doors hissing closed behind him. Only then did Sylvie exhale. Later, in Jaden's office, the atmosphere shifted. Do you think he'll talk? She asked. Jaden nodded. He already has. This isn't over. Sylvie paced. If he leaks anything, he won't, Jaden said. I've seen men like him. They don't burn bridges. They blow up entire cities. But we're ready. Sylvie looked at him. Are you? He hesitated. Number, but I will be. She sat down across from him, finally letting herself feel the exhaustion. I never wanted to be part of all this. I know. I just wanted a job, a place to belong. Jaden leaned forward. You belong here more than anyone. You didn't just save Ivy. You saved this company. She looked away. I didn't do it alone. Then he said, Sylvie, I was wrong about that night when I grabbed Ivy from you. When I said those things, her lips tightened. She didn't speak. I was scared, he continued. But that doesn't excuse what I said or how I treated you. Still silence. I'm sorry, he said. Truly, she met his eyes. Apologies don't change the past number, but they can shape what comes next. Sylvie stood. I have to go pick up Ivy. He nodded. As she walked to the door, he said quietly, She sleeps through the night now. Only when you're there. Sylvie stopped. A shadow passed through her eyes. That's not a gift. That's a wound. Then she left. That evening at a quiet corner diner in Brooklyn, Sylvie sat across from Carla, who stirred her coffee absently. "So Jeffrey's gone?" Carla asked. Sylvie nodded. "Suspended pending legal action, and the board divided," Sylvie said. "But Jaden's holding it together for now." Carla leaned in. "Do you really trust him?" Sylvie hesitated. "I trust that he loves his daughter and that he's trying. That's not the same as trust." "I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Carla asked, "So what's next?" Sylvie looked out the window. Outside, a little boy helped his grandmother with a grocery bag. Hands too small for the weight, but heart big enough to try. She whispered, "We watch the ones no one else sees." Carla smiled. "Like you watched Ivy?" Sylvie nodded, like someone once watched me back at the penthouse that night. Ivy came running. "Sylvie." She wrapped her arms around her legs and looked up. "Can we dance before bed?" Sylvie knelt, smiled. "Only if you lead." As the old record player spun a scratchy jazz tune, the little girl twirled with clumsy grace, her laughter echoing through the marble walls. Jaden stood by the hallway watching, eyes misted. Sylvie looked at him. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a father. And Sylvie, she didn't feel like a maid. She felt like home. The morning sun spilled across the Grayson penthouse like warm honey. Sylvie stood in the kitchen, pouring orange juice into a glass for Ivy, who sat at the island counter, swinging her legs and humming some tune she'd made up on the spot. Jaden walked in with his sleeves rolled and tied askew, looking less like the CEO of a billion-dollar empire and more like a single dad still figuring it all out. "Morning," he said, reaching for the coffee pot. Ivy pointed at him with a peanut spoon. "Daddy, Sylvie says if you don't sleep more, your brain will get all mushy." Jaden chuckled. "Is that true, Nurse Pratt?" Sylvie raised an eyebrow. "Only if your idea of sleep is 4 hours and 2 espressos." He poured his coffee and muttered, "Betrayed in my own kitchen." Sylvie smiled softly and turned to Ivy. "Finish up, sweetie. You've got school, remember?" The girl nodded, stuffing the last of her toast into her mouth. Jaden leaned against the counter. "The board wants a press statement about Jeffrey." Sylvie didn't flinch. "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth. He's being investigated. I'm cooperating fully." "And you?" Jaden paused. "You'll be formally introduced to the executive team as my advisor." Sylvie blinked. "Advisor? You've already been doing the work. It's time people knew." She looked down. "You really want to give me that kind of visibility?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I trust you, and I'm done hiding what matters." Her eyes met his. "You realize what people will say?" He nodded. "Let them talk." Later that day, Sylvie entered the Grayson building through the main lobby for the first time. Not through the service entrance. Eyes followed her, some curious, some cautious, a few cold. She wore a navy blazer, slacks, and the kind of quiet poise that made others straighten their spines without knowing why. She passed the receptionist's desk, the same one where months ago she'd been told to take the service elevator, the same woman sitting there now. This time, Sylvie didn't stop. She stepped into the executive elevator, the polished doors closing silently behind her. On the top floor, the boardroom was already filled. Jaden stood at the head of the table. When she walked in, conversations paused. 12 suits, mostly older, mostly white, all watching. Jaden gestured to the empty chair beside him. "This is Sylvie Pratt. She's joining us as my personal advisor on operations and ethics." A grey-haired man cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Jaden, we were expecting someone with more credentials." Sylvie sat down without asking permission. "I have credentials," she said calmly. "They just weren't forged in boardrooms. They were earned in ERS and kitchens in late-night shifts and early morning crises." Another man frowned. "This is highly irregular." "So was the theft of $3 million, Sylvie replied. "And yet here we are." A silence followed. Jaden leaned in. "Mia's been instrumental in stabilizing our internal systems. Her insights into employee welfare, client response, and internal security have already saved this company more than you know." One of the younger women on the board looked at Sylvie with quiet respect. "Welcome." Sylvia nodded once. "Thank you." That evening, Sylvie sat on a bench outside the hospital. The air smelled like summer rain and blooming pavement cracks. Carla joined her, holding 2 coffees. "You sure you're ready for that world?" Carla asked. Sylvie took the cup. I'm not sure of anything except that I won't be dismissed again. Carla grinned. Damn right you won't, the way you silenced that guy. What was his name? Bradford. Bene. Whatever. I thought his face was going to melt off. Sylvie smiled, sipping her coffee. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. Number. But it's fun when it happens anyway. They both laughed. Then Carla sobered. Sylvie, have you ever thought about leaving? Leaving what? This city? This mess, starting over somewhere else. Clean slate. Sylvie stared out at the city lights. I used to think about running every day, but then I realized if people like us keep running, there's never going to be anyone left to fight for the ones who can't. Carla looked at her. You're not who you were 6 months ago. Sylvie turned. None of us are. That night, back at the penthouse, Ivy had a nightmare. Sylvie was asleep on the couch when she heard the cry. She didn't wait. She ran upstairs. Jaden was already holding his daughter, but she was trembling in his arms, inconsolable. Daddy, don't leave. Don't let them take you. Jaden rocked her gently. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Sylvie approached slowly. Ivy. The child opened her eyes, still wet with tears. Sylvie, she reached out. Jaden didn't hesitate. He handed her over. Sylvie sat on the bed, cradling the girl. You're safe, baby. Nobody's taking anyone away. I dreamed Daddy was gone, and I couldn't find you. Jaden sat on the edge of the bed. You found her, though? Ivy nodded against Mia's shoulder. Then nothing else matters, he said softly. They stayed like that a long time. Eventually, Sylvie laid Ivy back down. The little girl's fingers clung to hers, even as she drifted back to sleep. As Sylvie turned to leave, Jaden followed her out to the hallway. I've never seen her that scared, he whispered. She's been through a lot. So have you. Sylvie looked at him. We all carry something. He hesitated. Stay for dinner tomorrow. Just us three. No suits, no meetings. She raised an eyebrow. Is that a request? It's a hope. She smiled. Then I'll bring dessert. He smiled back. That night, as Sylvie walked home under the street lights, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not peace. Not yet. But maybe the path to it. The next evening, the Grayson penthouse smelled like cinnamon and apples. Sylvie stood at the kitchen island, pulling a homemade pie from the oven with borrowed mitts. She wore a simple navy blouse and dark jeans. Nothing fancy, but somehow it made her look more at home in that massive space than any of the designers who had ever stepped foot inside. Something smells illegal, Jaden said as he entered the room. It's legal in 49 states, Sylvie replied, setting the pie on the marble counter. Can't speak for Nevada, Jaden smirked. Is that your way of saying I should brace myself? No, she said, handing him a fork. It's my way of saying sit down and shut up before it cools. Ivy came racing in, her curls bouncing with every step. Pie! Whoa! Jaden said, catching her mid-leap. Let's start with dinner first. Okay. Ivy pouted, but Sylvie made the pie. Sylvia leaned over. And Sylvie says, pie tastes better when you've had your broccoli. Ivy groaned dramatically and trudged toward the dining table. Dinner was loud. Ivy told a wild story about her art teacher's parrot escaping during class and biting the vice principal. Jaden kept laughing with his mouth full. And Sylvie watched them both, like a woman seeing sunlight after years of darkness. After dessert, Jaden leaned back in his chair, staring at Sylvie across the table. How did you learn to cook like that? She shrugged. You learn fast when you're broke and all you've got is a sack of apples and a stubborn grandma? He smiled, then turned serious. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you leave after everything? After I screamed at you, after the accusations? Sylvie's fork kecked softly against her plate. She looked up, calm but steady. Because Ivy needed me, and I wasn't going to let your anger become her trauma. Jaden exhaled slowly. You never owed me that, Grace. No, Sylvie said. I didn't. A silence settled over them. Not uncomfortable, just real. Ivy had wandered off with a book, curled up in a chair in the corner, lost in her own world. Jaden looked at Sylvie again. You saved her. Not just during that night, but every day since. She saved me too, Sylvie said quietly. He nodded, emotion tightening his throat. I don't say thank you enough. You don't have to, but I will anyway. He paused. Thank you, Sylvie. Her eyes softened. You're welcome. 2 days later, Sylvie entered the boardroom again, this time with a different air. She carried a leather folder under one arm and wore a charcoal grey suit that Carla had helped her pick out. The mood in the room was tense. Jaden stood at the head of the table, flanked by a few new faces and a few very familiar ones. The internal audit had concluded. The results were damning for Jeffrey, and for the department heads who'd enabled the corruption, Jaden began. The financial misappropriations totaled over 8 million. Several shell companies, bribery, fraudulent vendor contracts. We've already submitted the findings to federal investigators. Jeffrey's former allies shifted uncomfortably. And who found all this? One of the board members asked skeptically. Sylvie stepped forward. I did, with the help of 2 junior analysts and an intern, none of whom had ever been taken seriously in this company until now. One man scoffed. This feels theatrical. Sylvie didn't flinch. What's theatrical is the idea that corruption only thrives in darkness. It doesn't. It survives in silence, in politeness, in people too scared or too privileged to speak up. She opened her folder and slid documents across the table. Here's proof. Cross-reference transactions, false invoices, testimonies. Another member leaned in, reading. His eyes widened. This is airtight. Jaden nodded. As of today, 3 executives are suspended pending legal action, and this company, my company, is shifting its culture. He turned to Sylvie. And it starts with listening to the people who've been ignored the longest. That night, Sylvie stood on the balcony of the penthouse, arms folded against the breeze. The city lights blinked below her like 1,000 questions she hadn't answered yet. Jaden stepped out holding 2 mugs of tea. Mint and honey, he said. You're learning, she replied with a smile. Taking the mug, they stood side by side for a moment, looking out. Did you ever think you'd end up here? He asked. Not in a million years. He turned toward her. I want to ask you something. She looked at him. He hesitated. Not as your boss. Okay. Would you have dinner with me again? Just us. No boardroom, no reports. Sylvie blinked. Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Grayson? I think I am. She smiled, but her voice was careful. Why now? He thought for a moment. Because for the first time in a long time, I'm not leading with guilt or image or fear. I'm just a man standing in front of someone he respects and wants to know better. Sylvie sipped her tea. One dinner. He grinned. I'll take it. Later that night, Sylvie sat at her small apartment desk, a photo of her and Ivy beside her laptop. She opened a blank document. The title read, Rebuilding from the Inside. And as her fingers began to type about corruption, about truth, about courage, her phone buzzed. A message from Jaden. Ivy's asleep. She asked me to tell you she loves you to the moon and back. Sylvie stared at the screen, then replied, Tell her I love her all the way to the stars. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a woman caught between 2 worlds. She felt like a bridge, and maybe, just maybe, a beginning. The restaurant was tucked into a quiet block in the West Village, the kind of place where no one asked for pictures, and the lighting was low enough to protect secrets. Jaden had reserved a corner booth away from the windows, where the hum of other conversations became a shield. He stood when Sylvie walked in, his navy shirt rolled at the sleeves. No tie, no performance, just a man waiting. You came? He said, sounding surprised and maybe even a little grateful. Sylvie gave a small smile. You asked nicely. She wore a soft black dress that brushed her knees paired with a denim jacket and boots. Nothing extravagant, but the simplicity suited her. She looked like herself unapologetically. They set menus unopened. So she said, How does a man like you end up knowing about a place like this? My driver, Jaden said. His wife used to be the chef here. Said, It's the only place in the city that still makes bread pudding like her grandma did. Sylvie raised a brow. Bread pudding? He leaned in. Don't knock it till you've tried it. They ordered simple dishes, roasted chicken, wild rice, red wine. Conversation came slower than usual, but not out of awkwardness, more like careful intention. Neither of them was trying to impress. They were trying to see. You know, Jaden said, slicing his chicken. I used to think control was the only way to survive, that if I just stayed sharp enough, fast enough, I could outmaneuver everything. Marja listened quietly. But then you walked into that nursery and you weren't afraid to sit on the floor. Her eyes softened. It wasn't courage. It was instinct. No, he said it was heart. She took a slow sip of her wine. You talk like a man who's learned how to bleed. He didn't smile at that, just looked at her, his expression unguarded. Maybe I have. They talked for hours about Ivy, about music, about grief, about hope. Sylvie told him about her mother, a nurse who'd passed during the pandemic. Jaden shared the story of how Ivy's mother had once saved his career by believing in a project no one else would touch. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest, real. By the time dessert arrived, a steaming plate of bread pudding with warm cream, they were both leaning in close enough to notice the laughter lines around each other's eyes. Sylvie took a bite and moaned softly. Okay, this is actually incredible. Told you. She looked at him, spoon in hand. You're not what I expected. He raised an eyebrow. Disappointed? Confused? She said gently, but not disappointed. 2 weeks passed. Sylvie returned to work at the Grayson Foundation, not as a nanny, but as a community outreach strategist. Jaden had offered the role quietly, letting her decide, and when she said yes, the staff whispered, speculated, questioned, but Sylvie ignored it. She didn't owe them her peace. Carla, however, cornered her one afternoon in the elevator. You know, she said, folding her arms. I was wrong about you. Sylvie turned curious. What do you mean? I thought you were a soft story, a charity case, but you're not. You're still wrapped in grace. Sylvie blinked. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was, Carla said, smirking. Don't get used to it. One rainy Saturday, Jaden knocked on Mia's apartment door. He wasn't in a suit. No car idled outside. He looked ordinary, human, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bag of pastries. Are you busy? Sylvie opened the door wider. That depends. Is one of those for me? He held out the coffee. Hazelnut, 2 sugars. She took it with a smile. Okay, you're getting dangerously close to knowing me too well. They sat on the worn sofa in her living room, the rain tapping at the windows. Ivy was at a sleepover, and for once the world felt still. Do you ever get scared? Jaden asked after a while. Sylvie looked at him. Of what this is the noise around it. She considered her answer. I get scared when people love the idea of me more than the reality. When they don't know what to do with the parts of me that are messy, loud, complicated. And me? He asked. She leaned back. You make me scared because you see the mess and stay anyway. He reached for her hand, warm and sure. Then let's be scared together. She didn't reply with words, just rested her head on his shoulder and let the silence hold them both. The fundraiser gala arrived like a tidal wave, black ties, ball gowns, champagne, photographers. Jaden was the keynote speaker, and Sylvie stood near the back, dressed in a deep emerald gown borrowed from Carla, who insisted she wear something that would make even the coldest board member blink twice. When Jaden took the stage, his voice echoed through the hall. Tonight, he said, we're not here because of money. We're here because of stories, because someone believed when no one else did, because someone sat on the nursery floor and held my daughter when she couldn't sleep, because strength doesn't always come in headlines or handshakes. Sometimes it looks like quiet kindness. He looked across the room, found Sylvie's eyes, and sometimes, he said, voice softer, now you meet someone who reminds you who you could have been if you'd only listened sooner. The applause came slowly, but it swelled real and respectful. Later on the terrace, Sylvie found him alone. You really said all that? I meant every word. She shook her head, smiling. You're going to ruin your reputation. He stepped closer. Maybe it's time I built a new one. And under the stars, beneath a sky full of change, Jaden Grayson did something he never thought he'd do. He kissed the woman who once slept on the nursery floor. And for the first time, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like flying. The morning after the gala, the world looked different. Not in the loud, cinematic way, but in the quiet shifts that only people in love notice. The light through the window felt warmer. The air held less weight. Sylvie stood in her tiny kitchen barefoot making scrambled eggs. Jaden leaned against the counter, sipping coffee like he'd done it 100 times before, though it was only the second. I could get used to this, he said, his voice still rough from sleep. Sylvie didn't look up. To what? Burnt toast and lukewarm eggs. To you, he said simply. She froze for a beat, spatula hovering mid-air, then gave a soft laugh. You're dangerous when you're honest before 8 a.m. He took a step forward, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. I meant what I said last night. I'm tired of building walls, tired of pretending I'm too busy for life. Sylvie leaned into him. Then don't. But knowing that loving me doesn't come with polish. I'm not the kind of woman who smiles for the papers or fits in at donor dinners. I don't need you to fit, he said. I just need you to stay. Later that week, Sylvie returned to the Grayson estate, this time not to work, but for Ivy. The little girl had refused to sleep without Ma since the sleepover. Her new therapist suggested routines, transitional objects, music therapy, even aromatherapy. None of it worked. Only Sylvie's voice at bedtime would settle her. When Sylvie arrived, the mansion felt different. Less like a monument, more like a home. There were fresh flowers in the foyer, a child's drawing taped to the fridge, toys that weren't tucked away, but scattered in happy disarray. It was as if Ivy's spirit had begun to breathe again, and so had the house. Sylvie. Ivy came running down the hall, arms open, curls bouncing. Sylvie knelt, scooping her up. Hey, Peanut, did you miss me? Ivy nodded furiously, burying her face in Sylvie's neck. Daddy said you might not come. Sylvie glanced up. Jaden stood nearby, guilt shadowing his eyes. He approached slowly, watching the way his daughter melted in Mia's arms. I told her, I hoped you would, he said softly. Sylvie met his gaze. She's not a hope. She's a responsibility. I know, he whispered, and I'm trying. That night, Sylvie stayed. She read Ivy 2 books, sang the lullaby from the old nursery, and sat beside her bed until the girl drifted into sleep. Jaden watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Afterward, they sat on the patio, the garden lights flickering like fireflies. Do you regret it? He asked. Sylvie raised an eyebrow. Regret what? This is staying connected to all of this, the noise, the imbalance. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out into the darkness. Sometimes I think I was born outside the gates. And now I'm sitting in a palace, pretending I belong. You do belong, he said. She looked at him, eyes sharp. Do I? Or am I the exception everyone talks about but never truly accepts? Jaden reached across the table, his hand finding hers. You are not an exception, you're a correction. You remind people what real looks like. And if that makes them uncomfortable, good. But the world didn't stay quiet. The press found out first whispers, then full headlines. Billionaire Grayson is romantically linked to former nanny. From floor to fortune, the Cinderella story of Sylvie Pratt. Paparazzi followed Sylvie outside her apartment, and reporters waited outside Ivy's school. Carla stormed into Jaden's office one morning with a tabloid in hand. We have a problem. He glanced at the headline. No, they have a problem. We have a choice. And what's that? To rise above it or give in to the noise. Carla sighed. Then rise fast because the board is restless. They're worried about optics. Investors are nervous. Sylvie sat across from him later that day, her face pale but composed. I didn't sign up for this. I know, Jaden said. And I'm sorry. I'm not afraid of them, she said. But I am afraid of what this does to Ivy. She's already had too much instability. He nodded. Then we do what's best for her together. That night, Sylvie wrote a letter, not to the press, not to the board, but to Ivy. Sweet girl. You may one day hear stories about me of some kind. Some cruel people will talk about where I came from, what I wore, how I looked at your father, but none of them will know what it meant to hold your hand when you couldn't sleep, what it felt like to hear your laughter return after weeks of silence. I came into your life to help you rest, but you helped me rise. I hope one day when you're older you'll know this truth. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the one who sits beside you in the dark and stays until morning. Love, Sylvie. She folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer of Ivy's nightstand. By week's end, Jaden held a press conference, not to defend, but to D'Antoni, I have spent years building a company, accumulating wealth, and winning accolades, but none of it matters if I can't stand beside the people who've changed my life. Sylvie Pratt is not a scandal. She's a gift. She's not here because she wanted a seat at the table. She was at the table. The silence in the room was palpable. She has loved my daughter unconditionally. She has challenged me to be better, and I will not apologize for choosing heart over headline. The room burst into murmurs. Some reporters jotted notes. Others looked stunned. Afterward, Sylvie met him backstage, her arms crossed, brow furrowed. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. I never wanted to be a cause. You're not, he said. You're my choice. And with the world watching, judging, whispering, Jaden Grayson took Sylvie's hand, not to protect her, but to walk beside her. From that moment on, not as a billionaire and his nanny, but as two people who'd built something that no amount of wealth or gossip could ever buy. A life, a family, a future together. Sylvie stood at the edge of the empty nursery, fingers trailing across the edge of Ivy's crib. The room was quiet now. No crying, no nightmares, just stillness, and the soft scent of lavender that clung to the air like a memory. A month had passed since Jaden's press conference. In that time, their lives had shifted again, not with scandal, but with whispers of admiration. The press had grown bored. The board had backed down. But Mia's own heart remained cautious, like a bird that had once escaped a fire and now watched every spark. Jaden walked in, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie undone. He looked less like the CEO of Grayson Global, and more like the man who had stood in the hospital hallway weeks ago, begging Sylvie not to walk away. She's asleep, he asked. Sylvie nodded. She was humming when I left. That song you used to play for her. I found the vinyl last week, he said. Your copy from your apartment. You went through my things. He grinned, only to find the music. I missed the sound of your world. Sylvie gave a soft smile. My world was a lot smaller back then. He took a few steps closer, and now she met his gaze. It terrifies me how much bigger it's become. Jaden slipped his arms around her waist. That's how you know it matters. For a moment, they just stood there, their bodies warm in the hush of the night, listening to each other breathe. Then Sylvie broke the silence. I've been thinking, she said, about the foundation. Jaden tilted his head. Grace and trust. No. She said something new, something mine. A place for women like me who came from nothing, who were told they'd never belong, who raised kids that weren't theirs, cleaned houses they'd never afford, slept on floors just to keep a baby warm. He stepped back, brows raised. You want to start a non-profit? I want to build a legacy. Not with your name, with mine. Jaden's eyes didn't flinch. Then let's do it. Not let's, she corrected me. I need to do this myself. A beat passed. Then he nodded. Then I'll support you however you need. She stepped forward, stood on her toes, kissed him softly. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Within weeks, Sylvie had leased a small office space in East Harlem, close to the shelter she once called home. The sign above the door read, The Warm Floor Foundation. Inside, the space was simple. 2 desks, a few second-hand chairs, and one worn-out couch that looked suspiciously like the one from her old studio apartment. She sat with her first client, a single mother named Alondra. 3 kids under 5, one of them with asthma. I'm not here to fix you, Sylvie said gently. I'm here to remind you you're not broken, Alondra cried. Sylvie held her hand and didn't let go. Word spread quickly. By month's end, Sylvie had helped 8 women find jobs, childcare, and safe places to sleep. She bought air mattresses with her own money. Jaden offered a grant. She declined. Not yet. You really want to do all this alone? Carla asked one day, sipping coffee on the foundation stoop. No, Sylvie said, but I want to prove that I can. Carla grinned. You're stubborn and you're surprisingly supportive. I'm an acquired taste, Carla said. So are you. They laughed. At home, things changed too. Jaden had started making dinner once a week. He wasn't great at it, but Ivy found his lumpy mashed potatoes hilarious. Sylvie taught Ivy how to braid her own hair. Jaden started reading bedtime stories with voices, even if his British accent was terrible. And one Friday night, after Sylvie came home late from the foundation, She walked into the living room to find a soft jazz tune playing, candles lit, and Jaden standing in the kitchen doorway, with a plate of takeout and a sheepish grin. "I was going to cook," he said, but the kitchen rebelled. She dropped her bag, walked over, and kissed him. "It's perfect." They sat together on the spatula hovering mid-air, then gave a soft laugh. "You're dangerous when you're honest before 8 a.m. He took a step forward, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "I meant what I said last night. I'm tired of building walls, tired of pretending I'm too busy for life." Sylvie leaned into him. "Then don't. But knowing that loving me doesn't come with polish. I'm not the kind of woman who smiles for the papers or fits in at donor dinners." "I don't need you to fit," he said. "I just need you to stay." Later that week, Sylvie returned to the Grayson estate, this time not to work, but for Ivy. The little girl had refused to sleep without Ma since the sleepover. Her new therapist suggested routines, transitional objects, music therapy, even aromatherapy. None of it worked. Only Sylvie's voice at bedtime would settle her. When Sylvie arrived, the mansion felt different. Less like a monument, more like a home. There were fresh flowers in the foyer, a child's drawing taped to the fridge, toys that weren't tucked away, but scattered in happy disarray. It was as if Ivy's spirit had begun to breathe again, and so had the house. "Sylvie." Ivy came running down the hall, arms open, curls bouncing. Sylvie knelt, scooping her up. "Hey, Peanut, did you miss me?" Ivy nodded furiously, burying her face in Sylvie's neck. "Daddy said you might not come." Sylvie glanced up. Jaden stood nearby, guilt shadowing his eyes. He approached slowly, watching the way his daughter melted in Mia's arms. "I told her. I hoped you would," he said softly. Sylvie met his gaze. "She's not a hope. She's a responsibility." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm trying." That night, Sylvie stayed. She read Ivy 2 books, sang the lullaby from the old nursery, and sat beside her bed until the girl drifted into sleep. Jaden watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Afterward, they sat on the patio, the garden lights flickering like fireflies. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Sylvie raised an eyebrow. "Regret what?" "This is staying connected to all of this, the noise, the imbalance." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out into the darkness. "Sometimes I think I was born outside the gates. And now I'm sitting in a palace, pretending I belong." "You do belong," he said. She looked at him, eyes sharp. "Do I? Or am I the exception everyone talks about but never truly accepts?" Jaden reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "You are not an exception. You're a correction. You remind people what real looks like. And if that makes them uncomfortable, good." But the world didn't stay quiet. The press found out first whispers, then full headlines. Billionaire Grayson is romantically linked to former nanny. From floor to fortune, the Cinderella story of Sylvie Pratt. Paparazzi followed Sylvie outside her apartment, and reporters waited outside Ivy's school. Carla stormed into Jaden's office one morning with a tabloid in hand. "We have a problem." He glanced at the headline. "No, they have a problem. We have a choice. And what's that? To rise above it or give in to the noise." Carla sighed. "Then rise fast because the board is restless. They're worried about optics. Investors are nervous." Sylvie sat across from him later that day, her face pale but composed. "I didn't sign up for this." "I know," Jaden said. "And I'm sorry. I'm not afraid of them," she said. "But I am afraid of what this does to Ivy. She's already had too much instability." He nodded. "Then we do what's best for her together." That night, Sylvie wrote a letter, not to the press, not to the board, but to Ivy. "Sweet girl, you may one day hear stories about me of some kind. Some cruel people will talk about where I came from, what I wore, how I looked at your father, but none of them will know what it meant to hold your hand when you couldn't sleep, what it felt like to hear your laughter return after weeks of silence. I came into your life to help you rest, but you helped me rise. I hope one day when you're older you'll know this truth. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the one who sits beside you in the dark and stays until morning. Love, Sylvie." She folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer of Ivy's nightstand. By week's end, Jaden held a press conference. not to defend, but to D'Antoni. I have spent years building a company, accumulating wealth, and winning accolades, but none of it matters if I can't stand beside the people who've changed my life. Sylvie Pratt is not a scandal. She's a gift. She's not here because she wanted a seat at the table. She was at the table. The silence in the room was palpable. She has loved my daughter unconditionally. She has challenged me to be better, and I will not apologize for choosing heart over headline. The room burst into murmurs. Some reporters jotted notes. Others looked stunned. Afterward, Sylvie met him backstage, her arms crossed, brow furrowed. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. I never wanted to be a cause. You're not, he said. You're my choice. And with the world watching, judging, whispering, Jaden Grayson took Sylvie's hand, not to protect her, but to walk beside her. From that moment on, not as a billionaire and his nanny, but as two people who'd built something that no amount of wealth or gossip could ever buy. A life, a family, a future together. Sylvie stood at the edge of the empty nursery, fingers trailing across the edge of Ivy's crib. The room was quiet now. No crying, no nightmares, just stillness, and the soft scent of lavender that clung to the air like a memory. A month had passed since Jaden's press conference. In that time, their lives had shifted again, not with scandal, but with whispers of admiration. The press had grown bored. The board had backed down. But Mia's own heart remained cautious, like a bird that had once escaped a fire and now watched every spark. Jaden walked in, jacket off, sleeves rolled, tie undone. He looked less like the CEO of Grayson Global, and more like the man who had stood in the hospital hallway weeks ago, begging Sylvie not to walk away. She's asleep, he asked. Sylvie nodded. She was humming when I left. That song you used to play for her. I found the vinyl last week, he said. Your copy from your apartment. You went through my things. He grinned, only to find the music. I missed the sound of your world. Sylvie gave a soft smile. My world was a lot smaller back then. He took a few steps closer, and now she met his gaze. It terrifies me how much bigger it's become. Jaden slipped his arms around her waist. That's how you know it matters. For a moment, they just stood there, their bodies warm in the hush of the night, listening to each other breathe. Then Sylvie broke the silence. I've been thinking, she said, about the foundation. Jaden tilted his head. Grace and trust. No. She said something new, something mine. A place for women like me who came from nothing, who were told they'd never belong, who raised kids that weren't theirs, cleaned houses they'd never afford, slept on floors just to keep a baby warm. He stepped back, brows raised. You want to start a non-profit? I want to build a legacy. Not with your name, with mine. Jaden's eyes didn't flinch. Then let's do it. Not let's, she corrected me. I need to do this myself. A beat passed. Then he nodded. Then I'll support you however you need. She stepped forward, stood on her toes, kissed him softly. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Within weeks, Sylvie had leased a small office space in East Harlem, close to the shelter she once called home. The sign above the door read, The Warm Floor Foundation. Inside, the space was simple. 2 desks, a few second-hand chairs, and one worn-out couch that looked suspiciously like the one from her old studio apartment. She sat with her first client, a single mother named Alondra. 3 kids under 5, one of them with asthma. I'm not here to fix you, Sylvie said gently. I'm here to remind you you're not broken, Alondra cried. Sylvie held her hand and didn't let go. Word spread quickly. By month's end, Sylvie had helped 8 women find jobs, childcare, and safe places to sleep. She bought air mattresses with her own money. Jaden offered a grant. She declined. Not yet. You really want to do all this alone? Carla asked one day, sipping coffee on the foundation stoop. No, Sylvie said, but I want to prove that I can. Carla grinned. You're stubborn and you're surprisingly supportive. I'm an acquired taste, Carla said. So are you. They laughed. At home, things changed too. Jaden had started making dinner once a week. He wasn't great at it, but Ivy found his lumpy mashed potatoes hilarious. Sylvie taught Ivy how to braid her own hair. Jaden started reading bedtime stories with voices, even if his British accent was terrible. And one Friday night, after Sylvie came home late from the foundation, she walked into the living room to find a soft jazz tune playing, candles lit, and Jaden standing in the kitchen doorway, with a plate of takeout and a sheepish grin. "I was going to cook," he said, but the kitchen rebelled. She dropped her bag, walked over, and kissed him. "It's perfect." They sat together on the floor, eating noodles out of boxes. Lilia asleep upstairs. The world outside is irrelevant. Sylvie leaned back against the couch. "You know, I used to believe love was something for other people. Women in movies, people who went to college, girls with clean records and soft hands." Jaden took her hand, kissed her fingers. "You don't need soft hands. You just need a strong heart," she smiled. "Then I've had that all along." The next week, Sylvie stood in front of a group of donors, her first real fundraising event. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned up, a silver chain around her neck that once belonged to her grandmother. The crowd looked rich, polished, powerful, but when she spoke, her voice didn't tremble. "People see a woman like me," she said, "and they assume I must have been rescued. But I wasn't. I was seen, and that changed everything, not because I needed saving, but because someone believed I was worth standing beside." There was silence, then applause, some polite, some thunderous. But Sylvie didn't care about the noise. She saw Alandra in the back holding her baby, tears in her eyes. That was all she needed. Afterward, Jaden found her in the hallway, still holding the speech note cards. "You were incredible. I meant every word," she said. "I know," he whispered. "And you don't owe me anything, but I hope you'll let me keep standing beside you." She reached up, touched his cheek, then stopped standing. "Walk with me." He laughed. "Deal." That night, Sylvie tucked Ivy into bed, kissed her forehead, and watched as her tiny chest rose and fell. Down the hall, Jaden waited with tea. The lights were low, the air soft with music. Sylvie turned to him. "We've come a long way. We have, and I'm still scared sometimes." He stepped closer. "Good. Fear means you care." She rested her head on his chest. "Then I must care more than I ever thought possible." He wrapped his arms around her. "Me too. H." And in the stillness of that moment between past and future, between pain and healing, they held each other. No longer defined by where they started, but by what they'd built together. It was a rainy Saturday morning when the letter arrived. Sylvie found it folded neatly in a pale blue envelope placed just inside the gate of the foundation. No stamp, no return address, just her name in perfect cursive across the front. She stared at it for a while, unsure why her heart started to race. When she opened it, her breath caught. "Sylvie, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Marissa. I was the night nurse at the Grayson estate before you. I left under hard circumstances. I heard about what you've built. What you're building. I'm in trouble and I don't know where else to turn. Please help. M." The paper trembled in her fingers. She remembered Marissa. Older, quiet, careful with her words. She'd only met her once briefly when she was first hired. Jaden never spoke of her. The staff didn't either. It was as if she'd vanished. Mia's pulse quickened as she looked out the window. The city was grey and glistening like it was holding its breath. By noon, she was in a cab heading toward the address scribbled on the bottom of the letter. A run-down building on the edge of Brooklyn, windows covered in plastic, rust creeping up the sides. A heavy door buzzed open and a voice from behind a cracked door whispered, "Come in quickly." Inside the apartment was dim, the air stale and filled with a bitter scent medication and mildew. Marissa sat hunched on a torn couch, her skin pale, her eyes ringed with fatigue. "I'm sorry," Marissa said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know who else would listen. You're the only one who didn't walk away from the fire." Sylvie sat beside her. "Tell me what happened." Marissa's hands trembled as she pulled a folder from under a cushion. "I made a mistake years ago. I knew about something at Grayson Global. I didn't want to be involved, but I couldn't unsee it. Then suddenly I was gone. Disappeared from the staff list. No references, no pension. I've been living in the cracks ever since." Sylvie opened the folder. Inside were old documents, internal emails, scans of checks with forged signatures, A part of her didn't want to know, but another part, a louder part, knew she couldn't walk away. "They buried you," Sylvie said softly, "because you were disposable." "No," Marissa whispered, looking at her with wide eyes. "Because I saw what they did, and because I was going to talk that night." Sylvie didn't sleep. She sat at the foundation office, lights off, rain tapping against the windows like fingers on glass. The documents lay spread across her desk like broken bones. Some of the names on the papers were familiar: board members, executives, even a few who had tried to block Jaden's recent reforms. She called him. "Nate," she said, voice low. "We have a problem." By Monday morning, Jaden was in the foundation office, sleeves rolled, face tight with anger and concern. He moved quietly, reading through the documents one by one. When he looked up, his eyes were hard. "This is real," he said, "and it goes back a decade. Marissa was blacklisted. Sylvie said they did to her what they almost did to me." Jaden nodded. "We're going public." "No," Sylvie interrupted. "Not yet. If we go too early, they'll bury it again." He studied her. "Then what do you suggest?" She looked at the folder. "We make it personal. We show what this kind of power does not just to companies, but to people, to women, to workers. We bring the story back to the ground where it can't be ignored." Jaden's jaw tightened. "Then we're going to need allies." And they found them. Over the next 2 weeks, Sylvie met with journalists who still remembered her name. Women who had worked under the same men, former board assistants who knew too much and were paid too little. One by one they came forward, quiet at first, then louder, and then the video dropped. It wasn't flashy. No music, no fast cuts. Just Sylvie sitting in the foundation office holding the folder. Her voice, even in raw. "This isn't about revenge," she said to the camera. "It's about accountability. About the women who held this house of cards together, the ones who were told to be quiet, to be grateful, to be invisible. I was one of them, but I'm not invisible anymore, and neither is Marissa." The video went viral within hours. By the next day, reporters were outside Grayson Global demanding statements. 3 executives resigned. By the end of the week, Jaden called an emergency board meeting and announced a full internal investigation. Sylvie didn't attend. She was with Marissa sitting on a hospital bench, while the older woman underwent surgery for a long-ignored tumor. It wasn't serious. Not yet. But it had been growing quietly, just like the truth. "She's going to be okay," the doctor said. Sylvie closed her eyes in relief. Outside, the city continued. Sirens in the distance, rain on windows, lives rebuilding. That weekend, Jaden found Sylvie back at the Grayson estate. Ivy was asleep upstairs. The house smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary. He poured her a glass of wine, sat beside her on the sofa. "You did it," he said. "You didn't just tell the truth. You built something out of it." She looked at him. "So did you. You listened." They sat in silence, the soft hum of life all around them. Then Sylvie spoke. "You know what I've learned?" she said. "What?" "Love isn't always about falling. Sometimes it's about standing. Standing when it's hard, when it's dangerous, when no one else will." He took her hand. "Then let's keep standing." She smiled together. And there, in the quiet heart of a storm, they had both survived. 2 people who once came from opposite sides of a door finally understood they were never just saving each other. They were becoming whole. The story reminds us that true compassion often goes unseen until it touches the right heart. Sylvie's quiet act of love, sleeping on the floor to comfort a child who wasn't hers, showed that dignity isn't tied to status, but to character. Sometimes it's not grand gestures, but the quiet sacrifices that awaken others to what truly matters.